You know, I pat myself on the back at times on this show. Actually, I pat myself on the back a lot when I'm right about something. When I predict something before it happens, for example, before the season, I predicted that Ryan Tannehill would take over for Marcus Mariota mid-season and would turn the Tennessee Titans season around and that they would make the playoffs. When I do that, I give myself credit. So if I'm going to credit myself when I'm right, it's only fair that I call myself out when I'm wrong. When I previewed the 49ers-Saints game last week, I was fully confident in the New Orleans defense being able to contain the 49ers' rushing attack. I was fully confident in Jimmy Garoppolo's inability to put the game in his hands and carry his team to a win in the Superdome. And I couldn't have been more wrong on both points. I was very impressed with Jimmy Garoppolo on Sunday afternoon. He was composed. The Saints took an early 7-0 lead with a touchdown on their opening drive. If you've ever been to a game in New Orleans in the Superdome, you know how loud it gets when the Saints take an early lead. The crowd was jumping on the 49ers' first drive. Didn't affect Jimmy Garoppolo at all. He drove his team down the field in about 4 plays, and the 49ers ended up even in the score. You've got to credit both teams in that game. That was the best game of the year so far in the NFL. Both defenses had no answer for the offenses. Drew Brees was brilliant. Emmanuel Sanders was wide open all day. I don't know what the hell's going on with Eli Apple, the number 2 corner for New Orleans. I don't know if he's got an injury that we don't know about. But the past month, he has been god-awful. He was torched against Carolina, torched against Atlanta, torched again Sunday against the Niners. At this point, you put a one-legged receiver against Eli Apple, and he's going to make the catch. He's that bad. I really thought that the turning point in the game was the Saints losing Jared Cook in the second quarter with a concussion. He had the Saints' first 2 touchdown passes. He was a huge part of Sean Payton's game plan. By the way, Sean Payton's game plan was brilliant against the 49ers. He exposed the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, and Drew Brees made it look easy for a lot of that game. But when they lost Jared Cook, they seemed to struggle a bit offensively. They lost their ability to attack the middle of the field. New Orleans had plenty of opportunities to win that game. Jimmy G threw an interception off of a tip pass on the opening drive of the second half. The Saints couldn't take advantage. They had to kick a field goal. Twitter erupted on the fake punt where Traquan Smith was manhandled by the 49ers defender. No flag was thrown. Yes, it was a missed holding call. You can't call pass interference on a fake punt. I don't understand the rule, but it is a rule. Either way, that's not why the Saints lost that game. First of all, why is Sean Payton running a fake punt on 4th and 18? It was a bad decision. It wasn't the only bad decision by Sean Payton in that game. Listen, I love Sean Payton. He's one of the best coaches in the league. But sometimes he makes me throw my remote at my TV. His arrogance clouds his judgment. On Jared Cook's second touchdown catch early in the first half, there was an unnecessary roughness penalty against San Francisco for helmet-to-helmet contact. Instead of just kicking the extra point, going up 14-7, because they moved the ball closer, Sean Payton decides to go for 2 and fails. That one call ended up being the deciding factor in the game. That one call early in the first half completely changed the outcome of this game. The reason I say that is because when the Saints scored the go-ahead touchdown with about a minute left to go in the fourth quarter, they had to go for 2 to make it a 3-point game. They didn't make it. Had Sean Payton just kicked the extra point, like he was supposed to, we could be having a different conversation this morning. It's decisions like that that piss me off with Sean Payton. He drafted a brilliant game plan against the best pass defense in the NFL. They were decimating this 49ers secondary. The Saints' offensive line protected Drew Brees the entire game. The Niners didn't have one sack. But it was all for naught because of one bad decision. When he made the decision to go for two, I went on Twitter and said that you cannot do that in a game like this, where points will be at a premium. Now, obviously, both teams scored at will all day. But in a game of this magnitude, where it was going to come down to 1 to 2 points, every point mattered. Credit to Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers, though. He proved me wrong. He made the plays when it mattered most. 4th and 2 on the road, he throws a dime to George Kittle, who took care of the rest. I can't take anything away from San Francisco. Now, there were some bad calls by the officials. The unnecessary roughness on Saints rookie cornerback C.J. Gardner-Johnson was bad. I mean, that was a terrible call. But for the most part, I thought that the officials were okay. I can't say the same for the officiating in the Chiefs-Patriots game, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I think what we saw Sunday between New Orleans and San Francisco is a prelude to the NFC Championship game. We'll see how the seeding ends up playing out, but I think that the Saints are going to end up being the number 2 seed at worst. I'm not impressed with the Packers. We'll get to them a bit later, but New Orleans needs to get healthy these last few weeks of the season. Same with San Francisco. The Saints really missed Kiko Alonso and A.J. Klein, 2 of their 3 starting linebackers. Their absence was huge and noticeable, especially against the 49ers rushing attack. Now, Jared Cook is out with a concussion. Marcus Davenport and Sheldon Rankins, 2 key defensive linemen, they went down with injury in the Niners game. All of these are key players that New Orleans is going to need if they expect to make a deep playoff run. They'll especially need them if they had to go on the road to play San Francisco again. And I don't know what the fuck is going on with Alvin Kamara, but he's having the worst season of his career. Fumbled in the 3rd quarter on the Saints' 20-yard line, killed the Saints' momentum after they had regained the lead, gave San Francisco 7 points. Once again, the Saints are the best team in the league at killing their own momentum. It seems like every time they get something going, it's either a penalty or a turnover or a bad play, and it just kills the momentum. But Alvin Kamara has been off all season. He only had 25 yards on 13 attempts against San Francisco. He was a non-factor. He's only found the end zone twice all year. Hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3 at Seattle. Now, I know he was injured earlier in the season, but supposedly he's been healthy the last month or so. It's not like he's not getting touches. He just isn't making the explosive plays that we've seen from him in the past. All right, Behind the Line, episode 29. I'm your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. Let's get to the good, the bad, and the ugly from the weekend. It was a great weekend in the NFL. So much to go over from Sunday's slate of games, but going to start the good segment with college football and a couple of the conference championship games. I'm going to kick it off with Jalen Hurts. I could not be happier for Jalen Hurts. After spending 3 years in Alabama, where in my opinion, he was held back by Nick Saban, then he gets passed over in favor for Tua Tagovailoa, lost his starting job, he transfers to Oklahoma, and he leads the Sooners into the playoffs. How ironic is it that Jalen Hurts will be playing football in January, and his former head coach will be in a meaningless bowl game? He's had a hell of a college career. 3 conference championship wins at 2 different schools, 4 straight years making it to the playoffs. I'll be honest. I was not sold on Jalen Hurts when he was at Alabama. I wasn't a fan. I thought he was a game manager. I didn't think that he had the ability to throw the ball downfield. Lincoln Riley has allowed him to flourish and has turned him into a legitimate NFL prospect. Now, I know Alabama fans don't like hearing this, but it's obvious that he was held back when he was under Nick Saban. Under Lincoln Riley, he's had career highs in yards per attempt, completion percentage, touchdowns, quarterback rating, just about every measurable statistic. He's had a career high this year. The biggest difference to me from Alabama to Oklahoma is the average air yards. Saban had him dinking and dunking. Rely on our running game and defense. We don't need much from you, Jalen. Just manage the game. Average air yards at Bama was around 8 yards a pass. At Oklahoma, it's 13. If you're a young quarterback with the potential to go into the NFL, why the fuck would you decide to go to Alabama? I know Nick Saban's a great coach. He churns out running backs, just about every position on the defensive side of the ball. The one position he does not develop is quarterback. In the 12 or so years that he's been in Tuscaloosa, he's yet to send one quarterback to the NFL. And don't at me with A.J. McCarron or the other guy that was a backup for a couple of seasons for the Jets. He was so irrelevant, I don't even remember his name off the top of my head. Greg something, maybe. I don't remember. Who fucking cares? The point is, if you're a quarterback and your ultimate goal is the NFL, Tuscaloosa is the last place you want to be. With that being said, I think that Oklahoma is going to have an early exit from the playoffs. They're the number 4 seed going up against an LSU team that I don't think any team in the country can beat. But it was a nice run for Jalen Hurts. He's a Heisman candidate. Great ending to his college football career. Speaking of LSU, I think that Joe Burrow pretty much sealed up the Heisman Trophy Saturday against Georgia. Not only that, I think he's the best quarterback in the country, should be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Georgia's one of the best defenses in the country. I think they have the best pass defense in the SEC. They had no answer for Joe Burrow. All he did was throw for 349 yards, 74% completion, 4 touchdowns. He's thrown for over 4,700 yards this year in 13 games. 48 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. One of the best seasons for any college quarterback. And he made it look easy. How did Ohio State let this guy transfer? There's not a team in the country that's going to beat LSU. Now, I think their road through the playoffs is going to be more difficult than their SEC schedule was. Teams in the SEC, they can't score. This LSU defense is the weakness on this team. They're good, but they're not great. Oklahoma and Ohio State can put up points in a hurry. I feel bad for Joe Burrow, though. If he ends up being the number 1 pick in the draft, he will end up being picked by the Cincinnati Bengals, the team where quarterback careers go to die. The Bengals need a quarterback, too. They're not coming back next season with Andy Dalton under center. If I'm Joe Burrow, I'm praying that the Bengals pick Justin Herbert instead of me. But it's not likely to happen. I mentioned Ryan Tannehill earlier. I had the Titans as the number 6 seed in the AFC when I did my preseason predictions. I was confident that Tannehill would step in and save this season. But not even I could predict that he was going to play this well. The Titans are going to end up winning the AFC South. This team is on an absolute tear. Tannehill's leading the charge. He had a 91-yard bomb Sunday against the Raiders, throwing the pass out of his own end zone. The chemistry between Tannehill and his rookie receiver, A.J. Brown, is growing by the week. Tannehill had one of the best games of his career against an awful Raiders secondary. This Titans offense is dangerous. Elite running back. Brown is a legitimate number one receiver. He leads the NFL with nearly 13 yards per catch. And you've got Tannehill leading the way, resurrecting his career. Add to that a top 10 defense, and you've got a dangerous team in the playoffs. Tennessee is clearly the best team in the AFC South. The Texans have overachieved this season. I talked on Saturday about the myth of their high-powered offense. How in reality, the Texans are ranked 15th in DVOA, which is a critical stat when you are betting on these games. People think that since they've got Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins that Houston can just score at will, but they can't. And the Texans' defense is terrible. They give up about 24 points a game. I actually think that the Titans sweep the Texans. They got them 2 out of the next 3 weeks. I think Tennessee wins both of those games. The season is over for John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders, who the Titans just demolished on Sunday. For the 3rd week in a row, the Raiders were run off the field. They've lost their last 3 games by an average of 28 points. A few weeks ago, people were talking about John Gruden being a candidate for Coach of the Year. Fucking really? We talked on this podcast about their offense being too predictable when they got blown out by the Jets. And yet, here we are 3 weeks later, and nothing has changed about the Raiders' offense. Now, I've never been a John Gruden guy. I loved him in the booth on Monday Night Football. I don't want him coaching my team. On 4th and goal from the 1-yard line, Gruden calls a pass play. Carr throws the ball deep out of the end zone. Gruden has used the injury excuse for the Raiders' struggles, but I think that's bullshit. It's December in the NFL. Every team in the league is banged up. The Raiders were without Josh Jacobs. They missed him a lot in that game. Well, Jacobs was playing against the Jets and the Chiefs, and you didn't find the fucking end zone in either one of those games. So, what was the excuse for those 2 games? How critical was Josh Jacobs then? The bottom line is, the Raiders playoff talks and the Gruden Coach of the Year talk was premature. I'll give John Gruden credit. This team is much better this year than they were last year, but that's not saying much. There are still glaring holes on this team. They lack a real threat at receiver. The secondary is dreadful. They can't stop the run. They don't rush the passer. This team is not close to being a playoff contender. Now, I mentioned the Texans a second ago, how Tennessee's going to win that division. The Texans might not even make the playoffs. This defense made Drew Lock look like the second coming of Peyton Manning in Denver. You just can't get blown out like that at home. I say it all the time. Sometimes it's not losing, it's how you lose. Houston was never in that game. You blinked, it was 14-0. I think this team's going to end up 9-7 and out of the playoff picture in the AFC. I wasn't impressed with Drew Lock last week against the Chargers, but the rookie quarterback was impressive in his first road start. I've been saying the last few weeks that the Broncos are the best bad team in the league. All season, all this team needed was a quarterback. For reasons unknown, John Elway thought that Joe Flacco could get the job done. He was the only person in the country who thought that was going to work out. It about cost him his job. But Denver might have found their franchise quarterback with Drew Lock. He's poised, he's composed, he makes the right decisions, he can throw the ball downfield. He completed 81% of his passes against the Texans on Sunday. That's really fucking good. That's Drew Brees level accuracy. Now, I'm not going to crown him the franchise quarterback in Denver just yet. I was prematurely high on Kyle Allen in Carolina earlier this season when he went on that 4-game winning streak. He ended up being a disaster. But for the first time since Peyton Manning, there's hope in Denver, especially at the quarterback position. All right, let's get to the bad from this past weekend. The offensive woes in New England continued for the 5th straight week. I heard something Sunday evening that I've never heard before. Tom Brady and the Patriots were booed off the field at home going into the halftime locker room, down 20-7. When the Patriots were down 10 points in that first half, I said on Twitter that the game was over. This team just doesn't have enough offense to be able to overcome a double-digit deficit. They never regain the lead. Tom Brady can't get any help from his young receivers. They miss routes. They drop passes. Last 5 weeks, this offense is averaging 17 points a game. And most of those points were in garbage time against Baltimore and Houston. Against one of the worst defenses in the NFL, the Patriots managed 278 yards of offense. I hate to doubt Belichick and Brady, but at this point, what we're seeing, I think this is what New England is. A team that relies on their defense, and Tom Brady is essentially a game manager. That being said, as bad as New England was offensively, they should have won this game. They did not lose this game on the field. They were fucked by these officials. NFL officiating in 2019 is as bad as it's ever been, and it continues to get worse week after week. For starters, how many fucking times do these officials have to be told on fumbles to let the play go? Don't blow the whistle. Don't blow the play dead. Let it go. You can determine the outcome on the review. For what seems like, I don't know, the 1,000th time this season, that didn't happen. Patriots force a fumble at midfield. Could have possibly been returned for a touchdown. We'll never know because the officials blew the play dead, called the Chiefs receiver down. So Bill Belichick's got to waste a challenge. New England ends up getting the ball. That challenge is critical because of what happened next. Patriots are in the red zone. Brady hits a pass to one of his receivers, can't remember which one. The receiver runs up the sideline into the end zone. Touchdown, right? Nope, wrong. Officials call him out of bounds. New England can't challenge because they're out of challenges. Now, this fucking official that called him out of bounds was standing about 2 feet away from the play. You can clearly see the guy stays in bounds. He calls him out of bounds. 14 possible points taken off the board for New England. Once again, NFL officiating directly impacted the outcome of a game. This has got to stop. Roger Goodell finds players in this league, it seems like every week. How come he's not fining these officials for screwing up these calls? I guarantee you start hitting these fucking officials in their pockets, these calls get cleaned up. The Patriots have lost 3 of their last 5 games. What's more disturbing, they're struggling against winning teams. This team is known for winning the big games. That's not happening in 2019. Their best win of the season was against Buffalo back in week 4, back before the Bills were playing as well as they're playing now. New England's 3 losses have been convincing losses. We keep waiting for the vintage Patriots to show up, and it's just not happening. Gronk is not walking through that door to rescue this team. Your best receiver is Julian Edelman, who wouldn't be the number 1 receiver on any of the other teams in the playoffs. I would bet you that most people couldn't even name another New England receiver. They're still in good shape to win the AFC East, only because Buffalo has a tough remaining schedule and New England has the Bungles and the Dolphins, besides the Bills. I think that the Bills go to Foxborough and beat New England in a couple of weeks. But Buffalo is going to have to win out to win the AFC East. And they have games at Pittsburgh and home against the Jets. It's going to be a tough ask for Buffalo. But for the first time in, 20 years, it's entirely possible for a team other than New England to win the AFC East. All right, moving on. Where have all my Minshew maniacs gone? Bench Nick Foles. We need Gardner Minshew. He can save the game. He can save the season. Doug Marrone is clearly grasping at straws trying to save his job. You bench a Super Bowl winning quarterback for Gardner Minshew? Philadelphia thought the same thing. Let's take Carson Wentz over Nick Foles. Look how that's worked out for him. Nick Foles wasn't the problem the last few weeks in Jacksonville. This team just sucks. 5 straight losses by an average of 24 points. That's got to be some kind of NFL record. And it's not like all of these losses are coming against power teams. They're getting blown out by Tampa, the Colts, and yesterday by the directionless Chargers. This game got so out of hand that Los Angeles put Tyrod Taylor in at quarterback to replace Phillip Rivers. Taylor comes right in, leads them down the field for a touchdown. Gardner Minshew won a couple of games earlier this season, and people in Jacksonville and in the media were treating this guy like the Messiah. He's saving the Jags. When I debunked the Minshew myth, I caught some flack, but it's not like I'm some fortune teller or some football genius. It wasn't hard to see that Gardner Minshew was not the long-term answer. I told you last week when we did our NFL Coaches on the Hot Seat segment that Doug Marrone's days in Jacksonville were over. You can't get blown out 5 straight games in this league and expect to keep your job. Like I said earlier, sometimes it's not the losing, it's how you lose. The Jags show no fight. These games are over with by halftime. I'm done wasting my time talking about this team. All right, let's get to the ugly from the weekend. Starting off with another team that I'm likely done talking about after today. I am so fucking tired of this team. My New Orleans Pelicans were embarrassed again over the weekend, losing to the Mavericks by 46 points on Saturday afternoon. Worst loss in franchise history. This team is garbage. I don't know if David Griffin was paying attention to the post-game comments by Alvin Gentry. I was. Gentry basically said that his team didn't compete, and the Pelicans were at risk of becoming a pushover in the NBA. He called them a pincushion or some off-the-wall term. A guaranteed win is basically what he was saying. First of all, I don't know if Alvin Gentry has been paying attention. This team is already a pushover. This isn't the first game this season that this roster has been uncompetitive. It happened just 2 nights before against this same Dallas team. It happened against the Clippers. This team has lost 8 straight games. They're 6-17. It is early December, and it feels like the NBA season is already over in New Orleans. If the Saints and LSU weren't so good right now, this would be getting a whole lot more attention in New Orleans than it's getting right now. Alvin Gentry is lucky that the football teams in New Orleans and in Baton Rouge are doing so well. Otherwise, all eyes would be on him. And I don't want to hear about the injuries. Yes, between Brandon Ingram, Derek Favors, Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball, they've missed a combined 33 games. To be honest, I would prefer that Lonzo Ball miss every game until he comes to the realization that he's a point guard and not a three-point shooter. This team doesn't play defense. They don't make the effort plays. They've become an ISO offense. Basically, this team plays for themselves and not for each other, and especially not for their head coach. Which is why you see them go down double digits in the first quarter, and they never come back. J.J. Redick appeared mentally checked out after that embarrassing loss Saturday. It wouldn't surprise me if he requested a trade to a contending team. Who can fucking blame him? He's at the tail end of his career. He came to New Orleans to provide veteran leadership and to develop these young players and to play on what he thought would be a winning team. Instead, he's playing on a sinking ship with a captain in Gentry driving straight towards the iceberg, just expecting it to move out of the way. Until Alvin Gentry is fired, I am finished with these bums. I saw an article on The Bird Writes, which is the SB Nation site that covers the Pelicans. The article asked, who was the most disappointing player so far this season on the Pelicans roster? I'll give you a quick answer. Every fucking body. I expected to wake up Saturday morning with a notification, or Sunday morning, with a notification on my phone saying, the Pelicans have fired Alvin Gentry. Until I see that, I refuse to watch this garbage. All right, it seems like every week the past few weeks, I've been asking if it's too early to call Dwayne Haskins a bust. It started in the win against the Lions when he was fucking off with the fans before the game was over, and Case Keenum had to come in and kneel out the clock. Dwayne Haskins has started 5 games, and he is yet to impress me. Rookies are going to take their lumps. We've seen Kyler Murray struggle at times this season. But Kyler Murray's shown promise. He's shown his potential. We haven't seen that from Haskins. If anything, it seems like he's getting worse. In 5 starts, he's completing 55% of his passes. If you don't have accuracy at this level, your career is going to be short. The Redskins are going to be one of the top draft picks. At this point, I'm starting to think that Washington is going to select a quarterback in the first round with a top 5 pick. I've seen nothing from Dwayne Haskins that convinces me that he is a long-term starting quarterback in this league. Now, the Green Bay Packers, who they were playing Sunday, are the worst 10-3 team in the league. This team is Aaron Rodgers and nothing else. Once you get into the playoffs, you need an elite quarterback and a high-level head coach. The Packers only have one of the two. Now, I'm not saying that Packers head coach Matt LaFleur is bad, but he's still learning. And the other NFC coaches in the playoffs are Kyle Shanahan, Pete Carroll, Mike Zimmer, Sean Payton, and more than likely Doug Peterson in Philadelphia. Are you going to take Matt LaFleur over any of those coaches? This team struggled to beat Washington on Sunday. It was ugly. It was an ugly win. Aaron Rodgers said so after the fact. And it was also a very boring game. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead early in the first quarter. Managed to score 6 points the rest of the game. Aaron Rodgers at one point missed a wide-open Jimmy Graham for a possible touchdown. He also fumbled late in the first half while they were driving. Green Bay should have been up 24-6 at halftime. Instead, it was 14-6. This team is wildly inconsistent offensively. One week they're scoring 31 against the Chiefs. The next week they put up 11 points against the Chargers. Put up 24 points against the Panthers. Next week, 8 points against the Niners. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Green Bay is one of the only teams in the league where I really don't know what they are. What is the identity of this team? We're going to find out over the next 2 weeks. The suddenly surging Bears come to Lambeau next Sunday, followed by a road game against Minnesota that could decide the winner of the NFC North. But comparing Green Bay to the other playoff teams in the NFC, it's clear to me that the Packers are the worst team in the NFC playoff chase. All right, that's all for today. I'll be back Friday morning with news and my updated NFL power rankings. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. Anything that you guys want me to cover, leave me a comment in the section below. You can hit me up on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Have a good week. I'll see you on Friday.